Welcome to the Big Small Business Show. It's our Psyche of Success feature today, and we have Niki Seberini. She's a mind freedom fighter. Don't you love that title? Mind freedom fighter. She's a speaker and a facilitator. Today we're going to talk about something that we know a lot about, which is arguing. But we don't really know what that does to us, and why we do it so often, and possibly why we do it so badly. So welcome, nice to have you.
Thanks, Alon. Lovely to be here.
I'm not going to have a role play where I argue with you, but why is arguing, what happens when we argue? When you and I fight about something trivial or important, what actually is going on in our respective minds and bodies?
Well, you know, we're kind of addicted to being right? But you know, because
you're right.
Thank you. You know, and I feel so much better. You know, you get this incredible surge of wonderful hormones when you are right. So when I win an argument, I have a whole lot of dopamine. I have a whole lot of adrenaline rushing through my body, makes me feel incredible, makes me feel a little bit better than you, and I can very easily become addicted to that sensation. So we become addicted to being right. But let's take a step back. Let's look at what a threat is. Let's look at a stressful situation. You're in a meeting, you're in an office, you're arguing about something, you're feeling stressed. Now, as soon as you're feeling stressed, cortisol starts to flood the system. And cortisol is fantastic when you're dealing with stress. Unfortunately, today we have far too much cortisol in our system because we're so stressed all the time. But as soon as that cortisol is flooded in the system, it activates a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the primitive part of the brain. That's the fight or flight. So you're either going to fight, flight, appease, or freeze. And those are the options that you have. And very often we go to fight. That's what we do. We fight. And when we win the fight, we have the dopamine and we have the adrenaline. So you have situations where we can have an argument and we have two completely different perspectives. So the question we need to be asking at this point as well is, who is right? What is right? Why is it important to be right? And I couldn't help noticing the sign, for best results in this meeting, hang your ego here. And why would you do that? Because when egos are involved, you can't have a conversation. I can't see your point of view and you can't see my point of view because my ego wants to be heard and your ego wants to be heard. And that's what we're dealing with all the time. So we're addicted to being right. So how do we move away from this dopamine and adrenaline addiction that we have to being right? Collaboration, the ability to listen. And I talk about a perspective shift. Am I able to see something from your perspective? Can I put your shoes on and can I see it from your angle? Now, it's not always easy, and sometimes it's a really big ask. To suspend what you think is right and what you know to be is right, and it's only your perspective, and to go into another person's shoes and see it from their perspective. But you see, Alon, as soon as you're able to do that, you have empathy. I can understand you. I can feel you. I can see it from your perspective. And then, if we want to look at the neuroscience, you have oxytocin flooding your system. And oxytocin is about relationship and contact. And then we're going to be operating from that space. So the other space is, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm addicted to it, I've got dopamine and adrenaline, I want to win, and how do you feel? And what's going to happen in the meeting, and what is the outcome going to be? Or, I have the ability to do a perspective shift very quickly, see it from your perspective, then I have empathy, I have oxytocin, we have a connection. Ego's outside.
But you come back to the place where you could be right after that, because you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, this is me, this is you, I have a perspective, you have a perspective, I go, okay, I move across, I have this oxytocin going on here, but do I move back here? Because why I'm asking that is because otherwise we we might not have boundaries. And we might go to that appeasing that you mentioned earlier, that we're in appeasement. And so we just submit because we don't have, let's call it ego strength, which in order to have a point of view, to have a boundary of who we are.
So I think that's an excellent point. And I think with all of this, when you're looking at I'm addicted to being right, or let me see it from your perspective, you've always got to see the bigger picture. So questions are very important. The ability to listen to you without judgment, without my opinion rushing in, without switching off, the ability to listen to you, and in turn, if I've listened to you without interrupting you, without stopping you, and I've listened, there's a wonderful way of doing it. It's an imago. It's I listen, and is there more, and is there more, and is there more, and then I have the ability to express myself, what I think is right and what I think is true. And you listen the same way. So if you have two people who are listening, then you can find a common solution. So I prefer, instead of saying who's right or who's wrong, I prefer seeing it as a collaboration of your perspective, my perspective. We listen, and then we can engage. Then we can unravel what this is, and we can find a solution. We can find a way that we're both happy with it, because we both do think we're right. So it's not the appeasement. It's not I'm going to sit back with my feet up in the facing up, and I'm just going to relent and give in. No, I'm going to be heard. But we're going to collaborate. We're going to listen without judgment, and we're going to find a solution together.
Last question from me is for somebody listening and knows that they are the one who always has to be right. So they know that they listen and they're so quiet and there's no one else in the room now. How do you move from that state where to a different state where you're now the collaborative person? Because there is also a personality shift that in your familial situation or your community situation that takes place as well, because now you are that guy, you know. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
How do you shift?
I understand. So, and I hope I'm going to answer your question correctly. It all comes back to mind, and it all comes back to thought. So whatever you're thinking, you're going to be projecting. And when you're operating from a clear mind, then you're going to be seeing things clearly. If you're sitting in the boardroom, you're listening, you're the person, you understand. How do you then shift that? It's only a judgment. It's only a thought that's stopping you from being that. It sounds very simple. It is incredibly simple. It is only a thought in a moment that's going to either make you feel like you can come on board or you can't come on board. It is only a thought in the moment.
Niki, we're going to have to leave it there. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, Alon.
A great insight, and I'll be thinking more around collaboration. And I love the point that you made, don't let your opinion rush in. I think that was what I took, like the big thing.
Definitely.
It's a nice image for me about this, this thought rushing in, your opinion rushing in and saying, hey, hear me, and you should leave them out. So very powerful for me to hear today. Well, stay tuned. We'll be right back, or wrong back. When you take up mezzanine finance, do they require you to become the primary person to be paid back first?
No, that's the point. They're lost in the
That's
often lost
underneath.